So today we're going to talk a little bit about a quick intro of who's Dalkia, and then really what I've seen as a major trend of ESG entering the mainstream. And then with first the pandemic and then the protests, some of the changes that we see post-pandemic to ESG programs. So Dalkia is focused on energy efficiency and renewables. And our goal in life is decarbonizing the economy. We're typically installing energy efficiency measures or on-site generation for our customers across the US. And we're part of a larger company with services in Europe as well. And then also part of a much larger company, EDF, which EDF's the largest electric producer in the world, largest electric utility, and it also has the cleanest portfolio and the least amount of fossil fuels in their portfolio. You know, as a service provider that reduces energy and decreases customers' greenhouse gas emissions, ESG has long been an interest of mine. You know, many of my direct customers are directly responsible for implementing ESG programs at their companies. And really ESG is on the environmental side, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, saving water, reducing pollution, reducing any chance of an environmental accident. On the social side, more of the human rights. How are we taking care of our workers, our employees? How are we benefiting society? How are we impacting our local communities? And also impacting the health and safety of our employees, our customers. On the governance side, you know, how is the company set up and structured so that it's got diversity on its board? There's somebody overseeing executive compensation. There's somebody fighting for shareholders, and it has a vision of the future of how the company's going to be sustained long term. So ESG, again, to me has been really something it's been near and dear to me, but outside of my LinkedIn network, if I ask friends or neighbors about ESG, they pretty much look at me blankly. The first time that I heard ESG in the mainstream media was on the Showtime show Billions, and it was 2 years ago in season 3 in 2018. And they were actually making a joke about trying to pitch an investment with ESG, and they thought it was hilarious and it was a joke of investment. They actually brought the topic up again this season and talked about starting an impact fund where they were actually going to take both sides of the trade. And as people were trying to sell off oil and gas companies, they'd be able to profit. I would say in 2018, I started hearing it maybe once a month on CNBC, and then hearing it, weekly in 2019. And really, the money I think follows my general intuition and showing inflows into sustainability funds hit a record high in 2019. They're 3 times higher than they were in 2018. There's a lot of money going into ESG investments, and there's also a lot of new metrics trying to track those. I think one of the critical turning points in ESG was earlier this year, where BlackRock's CEO Larry Fink sent a letter to investors. He also sent a letter to CEOs. And in that letter, it stated that climate risk is an investment risk. Sustainability is going to be integral to portfolio construction and risk management going forward. Fossil fuel producers are now considered high-risk long-term investments, and that investing in infrastructure that could help stabilize cities to avoid impacts from natural disasters that might be climate-based, hurricanes, flooding, things like that. I really felt like at the beginning of this year, there was a great deal of momentum being built around ESG. Near the end of January at the World Economic Forum, sustainability was the star, as this article shows. Instead of just energy managers or sustainability officers talking about ESG, finally CEOs were talking about ESG and sustainability. And I thought, this is great. Finally the services that we provide will be in high demand. We'll get executive sponsorship. This is really going to help drive projects and drive our business. 885 companies have signed on to the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is aimed at reducing greenhouse gases to try to keep climate change under 1.5 degrees Celsius. This was the goal of the 2017 Paris Climate Accord that the US had backed out of. And really, this is companies stepping up to try to meet that goal still. Our parent company, EDF, committed to this goal in February of this year. And it seemed everywhere I was looking, ESG was all of a sudden being put into the mainstream. Even in my own retirement account, all of a sudden, if you look up a stock, Fidelity now has ESG as one of the criteria that they're tracking. And you can click on this and it'll open a report and we'll say how that company does against in ESG in general and then against its peers in the industry. So, in February, all I could think is, oh my goodness, 2020 is going to be the year of ESG. Then came March, and obviously 2020 is going to be remembered for something entirely different. It would have been much more prophetic if I had said that 2020 is going to be the year of PPE instead of ESG. Even my 4-year-old daughter's wearing PPE now. So as we're processing through the pandemic, ESG is still staying in the headlines. Obviously, it's taken a back burner to the crisis at hand, but I think climate change is still a big issue. It will not go away. It's still a long-term issue. And I think post-pandemic, ESG will continue. But the events and the protests for the past 2 weeks really changed everything I was planning to present. The 3 pillars of ESG, environment has always dominated. It's the one area where you can have a tangible savings. If you said we want to cut 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions, I can come up with a plan. It's going to have a strong ROI. You're going to save money. It's a good investment for your business. There's a ton of reasons. And it's also really easy to measure. We can say, you want 30% reduction. Here's your footprint now. Here's what it's been historically. Here's how it's tracking. The S and the G, I got to be honest, I almost dismissed them. Earlier this year, I was talking to one of my coworkers about it, and I looked through a corporate sustainability report for one of our largest grocery customers, and I was like, hey man, you're not doing a great job with your customer. They have a paragraph this big about energy and all the things we've done for them, and they have pages and pages about how they donate food to food pantries and how they provide for the local community and how they try to deliver food to people that can't make it into stores. And I was obviously totally wrong. After the pandemic, the S and the G are going to be much more important. I talked a little bit about the environment and the Paris Climate Accord, and when the US dropped, as a country dropped out, 1,400 US cities and states and businesses vowed to meet those same commitments. One that I would highlight is the New York City's climate plan. It's extremely comprehensive, and it really talks through a dramatic shift away from fossil fuels throughout all of New York City, eliminating them in buildings, in power production, and in transportation. And this is a major shift. And I think that now there's going to be needs for social plans that come up with plans for that kind of change and that kind of scale. In rethinking this presentation with more emphasis on S and G, I started thinking, applying the ESG lens, with my new lens to say, let's think more on S and G. And I started looking internally and thinking about, if I looked at my own company, and on the E, it's easy. We have all these tangible metrics and things that we track. We can say what the greenhouse gas reduction for our customers has been in the last 5 years. And when it comes to the S and the G, it gets harder. I think there's some great things that we've done within our company. And as I looked internally, think about it, one of the things is safety. We have a commitment like no other company I've seen focused around safety. And really what I've been challenged with as a manager, from the executive team down is making sure that our employees, subcontractors, and customers make it home safely each night. And the reason I highlight safety is, it really comes from a point of caring for our people. And I think that's a core tenet of ESG. And one of the things we've started in the past few years was doing a charity event whenever we have a team meeting. Instead of going out for another dinner and drinks, it was a good way to, one, give back, and two, to build the team. It started organically from a few employees. And I think that, fortunately, we have a company culture that empowers our people to start a new program like this from the ground up rather than from management down. In retrospect, we should have been doing things like this sooner. And I think anytime you look at your business, you're always going to say, oh, we should do more, we should do more. One of the other things we've been doing to promote wellness is a walking challenge. As I think about it and the things that we are doing, I've never really looked at it with this ESG lens, and I've never told a single customer about it. None of these things show up on our website. If there was a measurement that an outsider did on my company, we'd look poorly, even though we are doing these things. I think about, ESG today, and it's rapidly evolving with new organizations, new rating systems, new rankings. And the energy data has really been emphasized because it's black and white. It's really hard to put metrics on social programs, on governance, and it's really hard to compare one sector against another. If you're a consumer-facing company where you're dealing with consumers, you're going to have much better social programs than if you're a financial company. You may be doing all the right things, but you may not be telling the story. Today, getting a good ESG score on some of these metrics may be stating a 30% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030, publishing a public statement against child labor, and having a diverse board with a separate chairman and CEO. I think that currently the metrics are heavily weighted on the E, and going forward, this is going to change. You really have to aim for this moving target where the S and the G are going to have more weighting in the future. I think we want to avoid the problems that we see in education of teaching for the test. We can't just try to tweak our score by, changing this and that. It's really got to be a longer term focus, because I think that the metrics are going to get tougher and tougher. One of the companies that I would highlight is Microsoft. This was off of my Fidelity, looking up them as a stock. The report they have is that they're a leader in all categories. And I sat through, at the Verge conference last October, I went to a presentation on embedded carbon, and Microsoft shared about how they have gone through and the electrification process of all of their corporate campuses. So they've removed all natural gas, they've removed all fossil fuels being burnt at their buildings. They have 100% renewable energy. They're moving to a negative carbon footprint by 2030. And, essentially the ESG report, I know that Microsoft's leading because I sat and saw this on the environment. And then on the S and the G, what it says in the report is their diversity has improved 39% on their board in the last year. They have a separate chairman, and they have strong pay, strong benefits, and strong career paths for employees. I think that the S and G are really hard to measure, but those are going to be more important and with stronger measurements going forward. So talking a little bit about things that I've heard post-COVID from customers. I probably shouldn't even say post-COVID since we're still in the middle of it. But one customer I was talking to about projects and the typical projects that we do and their ROI projects. And for 2021, capital and what gets approved is going to change. And what we were talking about was digital buildings and having remote visibility to them. And that might be more important so that they understand how the building's operating when no one's there, if they've had a loss of staff, being able to remotely view these buildings. Another customer that we're talking to, they're trying to start an ESG program, and at the same time, their business is deeply hurt by the pandemic and the crisis. And my customer's the energy manager and said, this is now when we're really going to see how the CEO feels about ESG. Now we'll see if it really matters or not. And he's hopeful. He thinks that it will. But this is the time when your business is in crisis. How do you feel about ESG? Another customer, which is actually been my largest customer over the last 5 years, private equity firm, and my contact there said, I think now we're finally about to get serious about ESG. And I was blown away. I thought they had one of the best ESG programs of any private equity firm, and that they think it's just at the starting point. So hopefully that's true, and hopefully ESG continues to grow. One of the other ones I wanted to highlight is Albertsons. And yesterday they just announced that they'll donate $5 million to the NAACP and other groups to help support the Black community. And I think we're going to see more of this. I hope we're going to see more of this. But it does shift what the ESG program covers. And so thinking about things that people should be doing, I would say 3 things. Never let a good crisis go to waste. This was from Winston Churchill. Change is ever present around us. Our whole world has changed. And really what we can do is use this as a catalyst to help create change in our own organizations. I think now's the time to review your company with an ESG lens and recommit to public goals, which I think is going to help reinforce to employees. But making sure that those goals are not only around energy, but around people and how we're going to help people in our community, how we're going to help our own teams. I think it's anytime you're going to evaluate your company, you're going to see shortcomings. I did it when I looked at our own company, but I think developing plans to overcome those shortcomings. And I think the other thing is, embedding ESG in the culture and making it across the organization. Now is really the time to be able to do that, making sure that it's not siloed in sustainability, HR, or investor relations. This has to be a long-term, multi-year strategy where it does touch all employees. It touches from the executive team down, and that takes a lot of work. But I think now is really the time to be doing this. As you really look at ESG, it's really a platform for companies to make the world a better place. It's one that preserves our planet. It contributes to our communities. It's inclusive of all, and it protects our future by being led by diversity. I think that the issues that ESG aims to solve are going to continue to grow in importance over time. And now it's more important than ever. And we have to broaden the focus from just being the E and also look at the S and G.